So the PlayStation 5 Pro has finally been released, and in this video we'll go over everything you need to know about this console. We'll talk about how the PS5 Pro handles the most popular titles, how its performance has improved, and what surprises the Pro has even for owners of the base PS5. Plus, I'll explain how to set up and connect the disk drive if, like me, you prefer physical copies of games. Make yourself comfortable, there's a lot of interesting info ahead. At the very least, we're looking at a review of the most expensive console in history. Let's get started. The design has tons of details, but most of them aren't immediately noticeable. The first and most obvious change is the 3 decorative plastic ridges that separate the panels. These, by the way, aren't compatible with the Pro version if you're coming from the Slim model. Specifically, the lower panels fit, which is a plus if you want to transfer the disk drive from the Slim, but the upper ones will need to be purchased separately if you decide to customize the console. Though the size differences are minimal, meaning there's no issue with attaching them here, designers could have made it compatible if they had wanted. But the question is, why would they? After all, how else would Sony sell replacement panels? It seems that in this generation, they finally caught on to the accessory trend, like Apple and other smartphone manufacturers, who exclude things like cases, chargers, and other peripherals from the box. And to ensure accessories aren't cross-compatible between models, they make small changes, like moving the camera so old cases don't fit. Here, instead of moving a camera, they've adjusted the panel mounting points, something like that. Speaking of accessories, the contents have gotten a bit poorer compared to the base version since the vertical stand is no longer included. All you get are 2 small props to lay the console horizontally, though they're not very stable, and if you want it upright, you'll have to buy the stand separately. How is that even acceptable? Sure, the same was true for the Slim version, but it didn't cost 800 euros. At least you don't need to buy a new disk drive if you already own the Slim version. You just need to disconnect it from Sony's services and re-register it with the Pro. At least the rumors saying this wouldn't be possible turned out to be false. But honestly, this feels like reverse psychology. Before release, we were warned that we wouldn't even be able to transfer the disk drive from the old console, so we'd overlook the fact that it's not included for 800 euros. Now, finding out we can, it doesn't feel as bad, but that's not how it works. Going back to the design, in small ways, the console has actually improved. If this had been the look of the base model, I think a lot of people would have been satisfied. But as it is, Sony messed up with the fat version, making it mega large. Even though the Pro is similar in size, it feels smaller thanks to the design. The Slim also had its share of issues, with many debatable choices that the Pro has finally fixed. But ultimately, it's been the users, not the designers at Sony, who've paid for this journey of changes and improvements. See for yourself. First, the top panels are now matte like the bottom ones, unlike the Slim, where they oddly made them glossy along with the central panel. While the central part isn't removable, the side panels could get scratched when being transported, removed for dust cleaning, or when installing an SSD. So here, they've returned to basics. Plus, the matte bottom with a glossy top didn't look great to begin with. The same goes for the decorative ridges on the sides of the central panel, which were removed in the Slim, leaving huge holes that look cheap, almost giving it a knockoff feel. Now these ridges are back, bringing back that futuristic spaceship vibe, especially with the 3 central stripes, so it's hard to find fault with the design here. I actually really like it, unlike the hardware. On paper, everything sounds fantastic. The console now comes with a 2TB SSD, the very one with high speed, meaning more space for games and media, although a 1TB option would have sufficed and kept the price lower. The GPU has also been upgraded, now 67% more powerful, delivering sharper visuals, faster rendering, and support for higher resolutions. These upgrades allow for key improvements: advanced ray tracing and the PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution System, or PSSR for short. Using algorithms and state-of-the-art AI, it enhances game resolution to 4K without compromising frame rate, allowing gameplay at 60 FPS or even 120 FPS. Additionally, they've added 2 extra gigabytes of RAM for the operating system, which recently received an update now featuring animated backgrounds and informative widgets. The Pro even has a unique animated background featuring the processor on the home screen. Sounds cool overall: 16.7 teraflops instead of 10 in the base model, 64% more compute units, and 28% faster memory. But here's the catch: the main processor hasn't changed at all, still using the Zen 2 architecture, even though AMD has long since moved to Zen 5 processors. This might not be an issue now, but some analysts predict it could cause problems in future games that are heavily CPU dependent. For instance, games like GTA with massive open worlds and numerous background processes, like traffic and NPCs, require processing power rather than just graphics performance. And yet, the Pro version was upgraded only in the graphics department plus the additional storage. This has sparked speculation that GTA 6 might only run at 30 frames per second. We'll only know the truth after GTA 6 is released, but there's logic behind this reasoning, so enough of rumors and speculation. Let's get to the main event, the games that are already out and how they perform on the new console. Currently, games can be divided into 3 categories. The first category includes regular games that haven't received any enhancement patches, meaning there's almost no difference between them and the versions for the standard PS5, Fat, or Slim models. The second category consists of backward-compatible games that have received special enhancements. However, the most noticeable improvements are found in games that developers have specifically updated for the Pro version. At the moment, there are about 80 such games, but it seems that, seeing the hype around this console, developers have started to ramp up efforts, so we can expect more of these games soon. To distinguish them from the regular versions, there's a special PS5 Pro Enhanced tag, but for some reason, there are no markings on the previews like on Xbox. Perhaps, in the future, updates will include labels to mark games optimized for PS5 Pro, which would be quite helpful. For now, you have to check news sites or a dedicated section in the PS Store. I tested several titles, and the results were quite strange. In some games, the difference is noticeable to the naked eye, while in others, you need to check specialized channels for comparisons. I assume these are just launch issues that will be ironed out as the new technology matures. However, in games optimized for the Pro, like Spider-Man 2, 2 new modes have been added: Pro Performance and Pro Quality. In Performance mode, the game runs at a stable 60 FPS with excellent detail in 4K, while the Quality mode drops the FPS to 30, but adds more visual effects like ray tracing. So, even the Pro version still involves compromises, as 4K at 60 FPS isn't quite the new standard yet. Still, I have to tip my hat. The difference in ray tracing is noticeable even to the naked eye. The rays look significantly better. Unfortunately, for now, this can only be appreciated in a select few games, most of which are older PlayStation 5 exclusives. If they ever bring ray tracing to Minecraft, I'd be thrilled. But seriously, the rays are much more noticeable now and don't just complement the game, they completely transform it. However, the best implementation of this is seen in Sony exclusives, which makes me worry it might end up like the DualSense features that are fully utilized only by their internal studios. And as I mentioned, don't get your hopes up too much. This level of ray tracing seems to be limited to 30 FPS. This is where the much-praised PSSR technology comes into play, but honestly, compared to ray tracing, it's not impressive at all. Sure, when combined with ray tracing, it can boost the frame rate to a playable level, though not in every game. But without ray tracing, the improvements are negligible. I'm not a fan of how Sony zooms in on screenshots to highlight differences. I prefer to judge with my own, admittedly biased, eyes from a few meters away on the couch, rather than up close to the TV. And from that perspective, I didn't notice much of a difference between games with or without PSSR. Yes, maybe the draw distance is slightly better or the texture quality is a bit higher, but that might just be my imagination. When you're trying hard to spot any differences, you start convincing yourself they exist. But there's no wow factor like with ray tracing. The only thing that stands out with PSSR enabled is hitting 4K at 60 FPS, and in some less demanding games, even up to 120 FPS. On paper, those numbers are fantastic. However, in my subjective opinion, the experience on a regular PS5 isn't worse, at least not by a factor of 2, especially considering that the Fat version costs half as much. Again, these are just my personal impressions, but even if you look at comparisons from professionals like Digital Foundry, you won't see a significant difference. On the Pro version, the frame rate is just more stable even in regular versions of games. That's it. Maybe there's slightly better detail in small objects if you really look for it, but you won't notice that during actual gameplay. I genuinely tried to look closely until I caught myself thinking, why would I pause the game, crop frames, and hunt for minor differences on an €800 console, especially when the standard version still performs great even now? So either the Pro's time hasn't come yet with the release of newer games, or I'm just not looking at it the right way. But purely based on personal feelings, forgetting about comparisons and numerical tests, both the Fat and Pro versions feel perfectly fine when just sitting in front of the screen and playing. However, the Pro version has one more feature that the standard PS5 lacks, and that's Game Boost for PS4 games. It's odd that this isn't available on the regular PS5, especially since it doesn't seem like it would require much. Plus, on the Xbox Series S, which has a similar, and arguably better technology, everything works flawlessly. I guess it's just another incentive to buy the new consoles. On paper, Game Boost is supposed to enhance the visuals of older games by making textures sharper and increasing the frame rate. But the results are very hit or miss. In one game, the difference is genuinely noticeable. In another, it's almost non-existent. Essentially, this mode boosts the frame rate in games. So if a game previously ran at 30 or 40 FPS, it can now achieve a stable 60. but that's only if the game itself doesn't have a 30 FPS cap. This is nowhere near the level of Xbox's FPS boost and auto HDR, which genuinely improve older games, especially those from the Xbox 360 era. Perhaps it could be similar on the PlayStation side, but given the lack of backward compatibility with PS3 games, it's impossible to test. As for PS4 games, the improvements vary greatly, and as stated in the settings, this mode can even break certain games, which Sony themselves warn about when enabling it. By the way, to enable it, you need to go to the screen and video settings and find the option at the bottom called Improve Image Quality for PS4 games. Honestly, in games without a specific patch, I barely noticed any difference. Maybe if you take 2 screenshots and zoom in, like Sony did during their presentation, you might spot some differences. But that raises the question, what's the point if you don't notice it during regular gameplay? However, in games with a special patch, there is a noticeable difference in terms of better image quality, texture detail, and draw distance. But again, it's not like I ever felt deprived playing on the standard version. It's possible, actually, more likely, that as the years go by and new games are released, the difference will become more apparent. That said, considering Sony is in no rush to release new exclusives, let's not forget this generation is already 4 years old, and the number of new exclusives, excluding sequels and remasters, can be counted on one hand. I don't see much reason to rush into buying a new console, especially since this generation only has a couple of years left. It might be better to stick with the slim or fat version and then just jump straight to the PlayStation 6. Yes, the new console is sleek, impressive, and powerful. If you have the desire, and most importantly the budget, then by all means, go for it. However, what the Pro version offers isn't necessary for most people, and for the majority, the standard or slim models will be more than enough. Especially considering that Sony has started selling refurbished consoles on their official website with a $50 discount. It's a small perk, but a pleasant one. The Pro version is worth considering if you prioritize the highest frame rates, enhanced graphics, and new features like ray tracing and PSSR. And that's especially true if you have a large 4K TV but don't already own a standard PlayStation 5. In that case, the PS5 Pro would be an excellent choice, but for those who are already satisfied with their standard PS5 and don't notice pixel-level differences, there's no real reason to upgrade. So I'd like to end this video with a quote from a Digital Foundry analyst, who said that the PS5 Pro makes even less sense than the previous generation's PS4 Pro or Xbox One X. Back then, the more powerful hardware genuinely offered developers more options to enhance their games, at least by adding 4K resolution, which was just gaining popularity. But this time around, it's a different story. The PS5 Pro gives developers the option to skip extensive optimization, simply relying on the increased performance to cover any rough edges or shortcomings. However, this comes with a hefty price tag. Technically, the hardware has gotten cheaper. After all, it uses the same processor from 4 years ago. Mass production has made assembly more cost-effective, and there's even less metal used in the cooling system, making the Pro version noticeably lighter than the Fat model. Plus, the marketing campaign for the Pro wasn't as aggressive as it was for the Fat version. For context, the PS4 Pro launched at the same $400 price point as the original PS4. If the PS5 Pro were priced at $500 or $600, I think there'd be fewer complaints. Instead, we have a bare bones package, with a not so significant improvement in games, which we're not even sure third-party developers will fully utilize. And the library from Sony's own studios isn't that extensive either. Perhaps Microsoft made the right call by not investing time and resources into a Pro version. Instead, rumors suggest they're set to unveil a portable console as early as next year. We'll see how that pans out. But overall, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinions. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video on this channel.